Tupac and DMX are both true legends in the rap game, and Death Row Records from the West Coast and Ruff Ryders from the East Coast are both iconic record labels. Throughout history, Death Row Records and Ruff Ryders, as well as Tupac and DMX, have crossed paths, and in this video we will explain everything in detail, and we will cover several topics, including the connection between Death Row Records and Ruff Ryders, and how Suge and Dr. Dre attempted to sign several Ruff Ryders affiliated artists to Death Row Records. We will also cover the disses from DMX towards the West Coast, and specifically Tupac, recorded in '96, in which he said that Tupac could suck his D, and I will explain the theories about why DMX recorded those disses and why Tupac never responded to them. I will also do a breakdown of the beef between DMX and K-Solo, and K-Solo was also affiliated with Death Row Records for some time, and he also recorded several tracks for Death Row. I will also cover the story about the lowrider that DMX got from Death Row, and we'll do a breakdown on how DMX was almost featured on the track Gotta Love Gangstas that was released on the Chronic 2000 compilation that was released in 1999, and why that unfortunately never happened. That had something to do with Hak Tuh and Suge Knight spitting on that thing, and that thing was Leo Cohen's face. So hit the like button if you appreciate these Death Row Records stories and breakdown videos, and subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay up to date when a new video is uploaded, because many more interesting videos are on its way. And with that being said, now let's buckle up and let's dive straight into the topics of this video. And we're going to start in 1994 and 1995, and that was when Suge and Dre tried to sign several Ruff Ryders artists to Death Row. And this was also the time that Tupac was not yet signed to Death Row Records but to Interscope Records, and he was filming the movie Above the Rim. And around this time he came into contact with Suge Knight, and Tupac recorded the track Life So Hard, which was originally intended for the Murder Was the Case movie soundtrack. And that was a short film in which Snoop Dogg, then still Snoop Doggy Dogg, played the leading role. And the short film was derived from the song with the same title, Murder Was the Case, which was released on Snoop Doggy Dogg's debut album Doggy Style in 1993. And Snoop Doggy Dogg can also be heard on the hook of the song Life So Hard, and Tupac was supposedly paid $200,000 by Suge Knight for the track. But in the end, the song was not used for the Murder Was the Case movie soundtrack, but a few years later, in 1997, the song was released on the gang-related movie soundtrack, and this was a movie in which Tupac himself also played a leading role. The version released on the gang-related soundtrack has a different beat than the original version that was recorded by Tupac in '94. So in '94, a connection had already been made between Suge from Death Row Records and Tupac, and that was before Tupac was signed to Death Row, and Tupac would eventually sign later to Death Row Records in 1996. And also in 1994, Suge Knight came in contact with Irv Gotti and the Ruff Ryders, and he tried to enter into a partnership with Swiss Beats, Irv Gotti and their crew, and the founders and record executives of Ruff Ryders Entertainment, consisting of the siblings Joaquin, Darren D, and Chivan Dean, who had already founded the label in 1988. And they indicated that the partnership with Death Row Records was not in their favor, and therefore it didn't work out. And one of the reasons was that they felt that the Ruff Ryders rappers would not get enough attention among Death Row Records, and that the Ruff Ryders producers would mainly produce for the West Coast artists. And in an interview, Joaquin talked about this, and he said, quote, "Death Row called us to come through because they came to the studio in Yonkers. I talked to Suge and told him to come through. He came through and I showed him love." End quote. And in this picture you can see both Tupac and Suge Knight with the Ruff Ryders in '94, and you can see that DMX was not present in this picture. And Joaquin indicated that this meeting with Suge led up to another meeting, but this time it was on the West Coast, and this time DMX was also present. And Joaquin said, quote, "And then from there," and of course he was referring to the meeting they had on the East Coast, "Suge was like, 'Y'all gotta come out to the West,' and he flew us out." End quote. And this meeting in LA would take place in 1995. And Joaquin also said about this in an interview, quote, "I also even had a standoff between Pac and DMX. I caught them in the West Coast, so, just Tupac was busy, he was in the room doing some meetings, so he couldn't really come out and get his hands dirty. But I was the only one to get X and Pac together to actually get in the hallway to have a conversation. Pac was in his prime at the time, and we was on our way." End quote. And of course he said that because Pac already had some albums and movies out like Juice and Poetic Justice. And he also said, quote, "And then at the hotel when Pac was coming in, and I hooked up Pac with X. We ain't get to do a battle, but we seen Dr. Dre and all them. Suge tried to get us a deal, but we didn't like the deal, so we didn't cross over. Cause if I would have did that deal, it wouldn't have been Ruff Ryders. I told Suge, listen, I know Dre is the man, but I got my own producers and everything, so I can't do a deal with you, and Dre is running the show and got full access to all the producers. My producers work hard here, so I can't have them just being to your team, and my team is not getting the proper situation. So we didn't do the deal, I backed down. And the beauty of it is that we didn't do the deal, now we came out with Ruff Ryders, and lucky I made that decision so we can become what we are. End quote. And Ruff Ryders probably made the best choice they could make, but DMX, Irv Gotti and Swiss Beats on Death Row Records would have been legendary. Imagine a young and hungry DMX on a classic Dr. Dre beat with Snoop Doggy Dogg or even Pac, man, that would have been crazy. So back to the story, DMX also went to this meeting in LA and he only spoke briefly with Pac, basically only greeting each other in the hallway of the hotel, and they didn't sit down or had a meeting or whatsoever. And in one of the last interviews that DMX did before he passed away, he also spoke about this and he said, quote, I do have one memory with Pac. He was by himself and I thought it was kind of weird. This was even before I got a record deal because Dre flew us out there to LA for a meeting and we was like 7 deep. You gotta roll like that. So it was kind of weird, and he was referring to Tupac being by himself because you can get hit by a car and nobody knows nothing. It's not about being scared, it's about being smart, you know. And we was coming out of the hotel and he was going in and he was like, what up? So I was like, what up, yo? But at the end of the day, every rapper was food. Every rapper was effing food. So I said what up out of respect, but at the end of the day, I'm always comparing. End quote. And to me it's not entirely clear why Tupac was also in LA that day, because he wasn't signed to Death Row Records yet, but it could also be the case that he was invited by Dre and Suge to look at business opportunities to work together because Suge and Tupac already knew each other. But if you perhaps have any additional information on why Tupac was in LA that day, make sure to share it in the comments. In another interview that DMX did, he also spoke about the moment that he saw Pac, and he said, quote, I actually had a chance to see Pac and he was a cool dude. He walked past and I seen him. My man said, what up? And I was like, what up? Cool dude. End quote. According to some stories, the fact that Tupac was actually too busy for a meeting with DMX would have been the reason why he dissed Tupac later in 1996 on an unreleased original version of the track Get At Me Dog, and in a couple of freestyles he did. But we will go through that in more detail a little bit later in this video. And when Tupac had passed away and DMX blew up in 98, he would often be compared to Tupac and people would call him the next Tupac. And in an interview he was asked, how did you feel when Pac passed that a lot of people compared you to Pac? And DMX would answer, quote, no, I'm not the next Pac, I'm the first X, end quote. And in an interview DMX also spoke about what he thought was the problem with Tupac and what ultimately caused Pac to end up in situations that unfortunately ended up badly for him. And he said, quote, I think a big part of the problem was that he didn't have New York people. He didn't have his crew. One thing, being a New York dude, I know for a fact that you don't go to Cali and live there without having the goons by you. You can be the hardest dude in the world, but you don't go way over there without somebody that grew up with you, that had your back and loved you since you were in kindergarten, and he was down with you for real. It's easy to get caught up. End quote. So in interviews, DMX has never openly spoken bad about Tupac, but several tracks / freestyles were recorded in 96 that shows that DMX did have a problem with Pac for some time and he dissed him. The lyrics to the original unreleased version of DMX's track Get At Me Dog were actually a diss to Tupac and the West Coast, but on the version that was officially released on the album It's Dark and Hell Is Hot in 98, he changed the lyrics and K Solo, another rapper, was dissed instead of Tupac, and he also changed the line in which he dissed the West Coast. But the lyrics of the original version of Get At Me Dog with the diss to Tupac and the West Coast have been used by DMX in at least 3 different freestyles that were recorded in 1996. And you can see the lyrics on the screen, and they are, and I need to change it a little bit for the YouTube policy, but he said, transforming dudes get it quick, and yo for real, that dude Tupac can suck my D. And this line where he said transforming dudes can get it quick refers to Tupac first being from the East Coast and later switching to the West Coast. And it's gonna take all these dudes in the West Coast to barely move me, cause when I blow ish up, I have dudes falling like white girls in a scary movie. And he also said, What's this? I thought you dudes was killers. Demented. The F you want me to do with this coward? Finish him. It's ended. And on the version of Get At Me Dog that was released on the album It's Dark and Hell Is Hot, he changed the lyrics to transforming dudes get it quick. And yo, for real, that dude K, and of course he was referring to K Solo, can suck my D. And it's gonna take all these dudes in the rap game. And in this line he changed West Coast to rap game, so it was more general, to barely move me. Cause when I blow ish up, I have dudes falling like white girls in a scary movie. And as I mentioned, the freestyles with the lyrics of the original version of Get At Me Dog with the diss to Tupac and the West Coast was recorded in 1996, and that was done before Tupac passed away. And as I mentioned, he used those lyrics on at least 3 different freestyles. You can find them on YouTube. And 2 of the freestyles were done over the beat of LL Cool J's track I Shot Ya. You can find both freestyles on YouTube. One is the title I Shot Ya Freestyle version 1 and the other one is I Shot Ya Freestyle version 2. And they are 2 different freestyle sessions, and the quality of version 2 is a bit worse and the tempo is also higher compared to version 1. And I read online that DMX still had his jaw wide shut when he did those freestyles for a producer, but I don't know if that's true or not. The third freestyle, on which DMX used the same lyrics with the diss to Tupac and the West Coast, can be found on YouTube with the title DMX It's a Party Freestyle featuring Doc Holliday with Tupac diss between brackets in the title. It could also be the case that DMX also dissed Tupac on another track, which is Bring Your Whole Crew, when he said, "Who shot you? Oh dude, like you don't know." This track was released on DMX's second album titled Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood, and it was also released in '98. But he wrote the lyrics way before that and used them in several freestyles that were recorded years earlier, just like he did with the lyrics for the original version of Get At Me Dog. It's speculative, of course, and it could be a coincidence that he used those lyrics in which he said, "Who shot you? Oh, dude, like you don't know." But it could be the case that DMX had Tupac in mind when he wrote those lyrics. And it was around the same time that he wrote the lyrics for the original version of Get At Me Dog, in which he also dissed Tupac. And those lyrics could refer to the time when Tupac was shut down in New York. I don't think it's the case, but if there are any other demos or freestyles out there in which DMX dissed Tupac or the West Coast, make sure to share it in the comments. But the big question, of course, is why did DMX record those disses towards Tupac? And there are several theories about that. And as mentioned earlier in this video, one of the theories is that DMX was offended because Pac barely made time for him when X came to the hotel in LA. I don't think that's the case because X probably didn't even know that Tupac would be out there because he was invited by Dr. Dre and Suge Knight from Death Row Records, and Pac wasn't even signed to Death Row back then. But according to some stories online, they had planned to do a meeting to talk about the East Coast drama, but Pac was too busy and he never took time to really sit down with DMX for the meeting. According to another theory, the reason why DMX dissed Tupac is because Tupac had dropped the diss track Hit 'Em Up, in which he basically dissed the whole East Coast. And DMX didn't appreciate that and he took offense for those actions, and that was the reason that he recorded those disses towards Tupac and the West Coast. But it's also likely that DMX dissed Tupac to create a buzz for himself because DMX was still relatively unknown at the time in '96 and Tupac was the biggest rapper back then. So it's debatable what the main reason was, but it's probably a combination of everything together, and DMX was trying to get some attention because if Tupac responded to anyone, it would blow them up. DMX was also a stand-up guy who felt he had also had to stand up for the East Coast after Tupac had openly lashed out on Hit 'Em Up and other tracks in which he dissed the East Coast. And perhaps if there were any plans to meet Tupac that day in LA and it didn't went through because Pac was too busy, who knows, DMX was a little bit offended by that. So that could also be a reason why he dissed Tupac on the original version of Get At Me Dog and in those freestyles. It would of course be a bad move and very disrespectful to diss Tupac after his death. So on the final version that was released on the album It's Dark and Hell Is Hot in '98, the name Tupac was changed to K, referring to K Solo as I mentioned, and instead of West Coast, DMX used the more general term rap game. And as I also mentioned, in the '90s, K Solo was also affiliated with Death Row for some time. And the reason that DMX dissed K Solo on the official version of Get At Me Dog is according to DMX's book that DMX battled K Solo in jail and they both was going back to back. And DMX mentioned that K Solo was one of his best competitors, and when X got to the last round, he brought out his best verse in the battle, which is a spelling technique which he called Spellbound, and DMX won the battle. K-Solo was impressed and he asked X how he did that. So DMX told him and he broke it down to K-Solo and they were cool at first. Then K-Solo stole DMX's style and he also released a track and also a video for it with the title Spellbound, in which he took the whole idea and concept from DMX. In an interview, DMX explained the situation and he said, quote, "I just came up with this style of rap and I called it Spellbound. And I met K-Solo in jail and everybody was like, yo, he can rap. So I was like, give me something, let's go do it. He was like, PMD is my people, but everybody in jail say that. Everybody in jail is somebody famous that's their cousin or their homie. So we heard it." And of course he was referring to K-Solo hearing the Spellbound style. "And when I was locked up again, everybody knew." And he was referring that everybody knew that the Spellbound style was from DMX. And he would say, "Because I would put mixtapes out and all that. So people were like, did you did Spellbound? We heard it on the radio." And I was like, no. Then I saw the video and it was this dude K-Solo. And I was like, wow. Beware of the whack rapper. End quote. So that was how that went down. And as I already mentioned, K-Solo was also affiliated with Death Row Records for a while. And he also recorded a couple of tracks there. And some of those Death Row tracks are leaked. And you can find them online. And a couple of them are 16 Dead Dogs, Rock Rock, Shift, You Never Know. And he also did a few tracks with Corrupt from the Dog Pound, which are titled From the East to the West, which is also known as Wolf Tickets. And he also did a freestyle over the classic beat of Gin and Juice together with Corrupt, but that one is only available in poor quality. Another rumor that was going around on the internet is that DMX was featured in the video clip of Tupac's track Made N featuring the Outlaws. And I can be very briefly about this because that never happened and it's an old rumor that has been disproven. But there was one time in 1999 when DMX almost made a featuring on a Death Row compilation, which was the Chronic 2000. And on that compilation there is a track titled Gotta Love Gangstas, and it's a track from The Realist featuring Richie Rich and Scarface. And The Realist was signed to Death Row Records around the period of 98 to 2001, and he received a lot of criticism because his voice, style and appearance were exactly the same as that of Tupac, who had passed away a few years earlier. So therefore The Realist is often referred to as a Tupac clone or a gimmick. But The Realist was supposed to do this track Gotta Love Gangstas for the Chronic 2000 compilation album together with DMX, and a version for it was also recorded, but it has never been leaked or released. If you search on YouTube you can find a video that has a small part of the version with DMX on it. Well, actually you cannot hear anything from DMX, but you can hear The Realist and he's referring to DMX in that small clip that is available. So basically The Realist is saying DMX's name in the intro or the outro of that song. And The Realist also spoke about this in an interview and he said, and of course he was referring to the track Gotta Love Gangstas, quote, "It was done with me and DMX and then Suge spit Lyor Cohen's face, so we had to scrap that." So Suge was like, "Who else you wanna put on the record then?" And The Realist was like, "I want Richie Rich and Scarface on that record. It's like 5 different versions of that record. I did it twice by myself, then I did it with DMX, then I did it with Richie Rich and Scarface, and then I did a different version with my little homies The Last Circle. The day I did it with DMX, he had me on some groupie-ish at first. I just had to understand that's just how that dude got down. I go pull up on him in Santa Monica, the dude doing his photo shoot, he in there smoking and drinking." End quote. So The Realist was thinking by himself, damn, how we gonna do this record? And Suge had built a white lowrider with DMX dog Boomer spray painted on the trunk. They pulled up with a tow truck with the lowrider and showed DMX how to hit the switches and everything. According to The Realist, instead of doing the record, DMX was messing with the car and smoking, drinking, taking pictures and all that. Finally, at 8 in the morning, they got the record done, and according to The Realist, DMX was cold-blooded with his verse and he did it off the chain. And DMX also spoke about how he got the lowrider and how he met The Realist in one of his last interviews he did before he passed away. And he mentioned that Lyor Cohen bought the Lowrider 64 from Suge Knight or from Death Row. And he said, quote, "Lyor bought me a Lowrider 64 from Suge Knight or Death Row. So the people that bought the papers, I forgot his name, but he had this artist with him and he said, 'This is my man, yo.' And I heard him and the dude sounded exactly like Pac. I was like, okay, I don't know where you're going with that." End quote. So in this interview, DMX confirmed that he met The Realist, but he didn't say anything about recording the song. Unfortunately, Suge and Leo Cohen got into it afterwards at a prison visit. He spit in his face, and therefore the song with DMX was cancelled. And the reason why Suge Knight spit Leo Cohen in his face was because Cohen was interested in signing Snoop. And Suge initially said that he wanted like 13 million for Snoop, and Leo Cohen had to talk to the board about it. So later he visited Suge again while he was in prison, and he said that the most they could offer Suge for Snoop was 7 million. And Suge was insulted by that, and he said no. And then he did "Twah," and he spat on that thing. And that thing was, as I already mentioned, Leo's face. So that's how it went down, and that was the reason that the version with DMX on Gotta Love Gangstas was scrapped from the Chronic 2000 compilation. And I think it's a shame that DMX never really got to do anything together with Death Row Records, because it would have been epic. Imagine if Tupac hadn't died and he had responded to DMX freestyle diss, leading to a beef between Death Row and Ruff Ryders. That would definitely be a recipe for a whole lot of fireworks, drama and sensation. DMX was a legendary battle rapper, and Tupac was also a legend when it came to freestyling. So who do you think would win a rap battle between Tupac and DMX? Feel free to share your opinion in the comment section. And both Tupac and DMX are legends in the rap game, and it would have been a great battle if they were to compete against each other. And it would be even cooler if they worked together on the same label if DMX was signed to Death Row in '95. And one thing is certain, DMX and Tupac have been two legendary artists who have left a big mark on the rap game. Death Row Records and Ruff Ryders are also two record labels that have achieved a lot and had the rap game completely on lock in their own era. Drop a like if you want to see more informative videos like this about the legacy of Death Row Records, and join the community and subscribe to the channel. Many more cool videos are on its way, so stay tuned, and if you don't want to miss a new video, don't forget to click on the notification bell. Check out the channel for more interesting videos. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you back again in the next video.